Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that gravity has vanished. Not forever, not for a day, just 5 seconds. It sounds insignificant. After all, 5 seconds pass in the blink of an eye. But those 5 seconds could be enough to transform our planet into a scene of global chaos. Right now, gravity is doing something extraordinary. It is holding the oceans in place, keeping the atmosphere wrapped around Earth, and anchoring every person, building, car, and mountain to the surface. Most of the time, we never notice it. Gravity is silent, invisible, constant. Yet if it suddenly disappeared, even briefly, the consequences would be staggering. At first, you might imagine people instantly flying into space. Movies often portray gravity as a simple on and off switch. Turn it off and everything immediately floats away. But reality is far stranger and far more terrifying. Because when gravity disappears, the world doesn't simply stop working. Instead, millions of different systems begin failing at the same time. The roads beneath your feet, the air around your body, the oceans covering our planet, the aircraft crossing the skies, even the very atmosphere that allows us to breathe. Everything depends on gravity, and most of us don't realize how deeply. The truth is that gravity is not just the force that keeps us on the ground. It is one of the fundamental reasons Earth is able to support life at all. Without gravity, there would be no rivers, no weather, no oceans, no stable atmosphere, no Earth as we know it. For billions of years, gravity has quietly shaped our world. It formed planets from clouds of dust, it ignited stars, it built galaxies, and it continues to govern nearly everything we see in the universe. Yet despite its importance, gravity remains one of the greatest mysteries in science. We know what it does. We can measure it with incredible precision. We can predict its effects across the cosmos. But we still don't fully understand what gravity truly is. And tonight, we're going to imagine something that has never happened in Earth's history. A moment when that invisible force suddenly vanishes. Not gradually, not over millions of years, not because the Earth is destroyed, but instantly. One moment gravity exists. The next moment, it doesn't. To understand what happens next, we need to begin with a simple question. What is gravity actually doing right now? Because before we can watch Earth lose gravity, we first need to understand everything gravity is holding together. And the answer is far bigger than most people realize. So what would really happen if Earth suddenly lost gravity for just 5 seconds? Let's start at the exact moment it happens. No warning, no strange sound, no flash in the sky. One moment gravity exists. The next moment it doesn't. At first, most people wouldn't even realize anything had changed. Gravity isn't something we consciously feel. What we actually feel is our body's contact with the ground beneath us. The floor pushes upward against our feet, creating the sensation we call weight. The instant gravity disappears, that force vanishes. And suddenly, everything becomes weightless. The first noticeable changes would happen to loose objects. A coffee mug sitting on a desk, a pen resting on a table, a smartphone left on a couch. Anything not firmly attached would begin drifting away from the surface. Not because something is pulling it upward, but because nothing is pulling it downward anymore. Inside homes and offices around the world, people would watch everyday objects slowly leave the places where they had been sitting just moments earlier. At the same time, people themselves would begin floating. Someone sitting in a chair would find that the chair is no longer supporting their weight. A person standing still would gradually lose contact with the ground. Anyone jumping, running, or moving at that moment would behave very differently. Without gravity pulling them back down, they would continue moving in whatever direction they were already traveling. For many people, the first second would feel confusing rather than frightening. A strange sensation of weightlessness, almost like being underwater. But that confusion wouldn't last long, because by the second, the effects become impossible to ignore. Cars traveling along roads depend on gravity more than most people realize. The reason tires grip the road is because gravity presses them against the surface. Remove gravity and that grip disappears. Drivers would suddenly lose traction. Steering becomes unreliable. Braking becomes ineffective. Vehicles continue moving forward due to momentum, but controlling them becomes extremely difficult. Motorcycles would be affected even more dramatically. Even a small bump could send them drifting away from the road. The same principle affects trains. The enormous weight of a train normally keeps it firmly connected to the tracks. Without gravity, that connection is lost. Across the world, transportation systems begin behaving in ways they were never designed to handle. Meanwhile, inside buildings, another problem emerges. Objects that were once harmless become floating hazards. Books, computers, tools, kitchen appliances. Anything not secured can drift freely through rooms. In crowded areas, people collide with walls, ceilings, furniture, and each other. The situation becomes increasingly chaotic. By the third second, larger systems begin responding. One of the most important is the atmosphere. Many people imagine that the moment gravity disappears, all the air instantly escapes into space. Fortunately, that's not what would happen. The atmosphere already has momentum and cannot simply vanish in an instant. 5 seconds is far too short for Earth to lose all of its air. However, the atmosphere would begin expanding outward. The process would be subtle at first, but it would be happening. Gravity normally keeps trillions of tons of air concentrated around our planet. Without that force, the atmosphere begins responding immediately. Weather systems become unstable. Air currents change. The environment starts behaving in ways never observed before. At the same time, Earth's oceans begin reacting. Again, the change would not be immediate or explosive. The oceans contain enormous amounts of mass and momentum. Water would not suddenly shoot into space. But the force keeping it firmly attached to Earth has disappeared. The surface of the oceans would begin rising and shifting. Waves would behave unpredictably. Coastlines could experience unusual surges. For anyone near the ocean, the view would be unlike anything ever recorded in human history. By the fourth second, humanity begins to understand that something is seriously wrong. Across cities, airports, highways, and ports, reports of strange events appear almost simultaneously. Pilots report unusual flight conditions. Drivers report losing control. People report floating. Scientists struggle to understand what could possibly connect all these observations. But before anyone can form an explanation, the fifth second arrives. The final second without gravity. By now, many people are no longer standing where they were when the event began. Loose objects fill the air. Vehicles have lost stability. Water is behaving strangely. The atmosphere is beginning to respond. The entire planet has entered a state that should be impossible. For 5 seconds, Earth exists without one of the fundamental forces that shaped it. And then, just as suddenly as gravity vanished, it returns. What happens next is where the real damage begins. Because surviving 5 seconds without gravity is one thing. Surviving the moment gravity comes back is something else entirely. 5 seconds. That's all it took. By the time gravity returned, the event was already over. People looked around in confusion. Many weren't even sure what had happened. Some thought they had experienced an earthquake. Others believed they were dreaming. Across social media, videos began appearing almost immediately. Footage from homes, offices, airports, highways. The videos all showed the same thing. Objects floating, people becoming weightless, cars briefly losing contact with roads, and then just as suddenly, everything falling back down. At first, many viewers assumed the clips were fake. Computer-generated effects, internet hoaxes. But there was one problem. The videos were coming from everywhere. Different countries, different languages, different time zones. Yet all of them showed the same event occurring at exactly the same moment. Within hours, scientists around the world began comparing data. What they discovered was astonishing. Sensitive instruments had recorded a sudden drop in Earth's gravitational field. For 5 seconds, gravity had effectively disappeared. Then it returned. No known physical process could explain it. And that created a much larger problem. If scientists couldn't explain what happened, how could they be sure it wouldn't happen again? For the first time in modern history, humanity faced a threat it didn't understand. We know how to prepare for hurricanes. We know how to monitor volcanoes. We know how to track asteroids. But how do you prepare for gravity itself becoming unstable? The answer is simple. You can't. And that's what makes the event so unsettling. Because gravity isn't supposed to fail. It's one of the fundamental features of reality. We build cities assuming gravity will always be there. Engineers design bridges assuming gravity is constant. Pilots fly aircraft assuming gravity behaves predictably. Every system in modern civilization depends on that assumption. For thousands of years, it has been a safe assumption. Until now, as investigators searched for answers, another realization emerged. Humanity had narrowly avoided a catastrophe. 5 seconds was enough to create chaos, but not enough to destroy the planet. If the event had lasted longer, the consequences would have been dramatically different. A few more seconds could have produced far greater damage. A few minutes could have transformed Earth entirely. And that's when scientists began asking the question that would dominate discussions for years. What if gravity hadn't returned after 5 seconds? What if it had remained gone for 1 minute? Or 1 hour? Or forever? The answers would reveal just how dependent life is on a force most of us never think about. And they would change the way humanity viewed its place in the universe. When scientists began studying the event, one conclusion became clear almost immediately. Humanity had been incredibly fortunate. 5 seconds was enough to cause confusion, enough to cause accidents, enough to remind us how dependent we are on gravity. But 5 seconds was not enough to fundamentally change the planet. A longer event would have been a very different story. To understand why, imagine that gravity does not return after 5 seconds. Instead, a 6th second passes, then a 7th, then an 8th. At first, the changes would still seem manageable. People would continue floating. Objects would drift farther from where they started. Vehicles would become increasingly uncontrollable. But as the seconds turn into minutes, the situation begins to escalate. One of the first major concerns would be Earth's atmosphere. Many people imagine that the atmosphere would instantly disappear into space. In reality, that wouldn't happen. The atmosphere has mass and momentum. It would take time to disperse. But without gravity holding it close to the planet, the process would eventually begin. The air around Earth would slowly expand outward. The protective blanket that allows life to exist would start drifting away. Breathing would become increasingly difficult. Weather systems would collapse. The sky itself would begin to change. The oceans would face a similar problem. Water would not immediately leave Earth. But without gravity pulling it toward the planet, the oceans could no longer remain in their familiar form. Over time, vast amounts of water would begin moving away from the surface. The coastlines of Earth would become unrecognizable. Rivers would stop flowing. Rain would no longer fall. The water cycle that has supported life for billions of years would come to an end. Yet even these changes would take time. The immediate danger would come from something else. Momentum. Everything on Earth is already moving. The planet rotates at roughly 1,670 kilometers per hour at the equator. At the same time, Earth orbits the Sun at nearly 107,000 kilometers per hour. And the entire solar system moves through the galaxy at even greater speeds. Normally, gravity keeps everything connected. Without gravity, those connections begin breaking down. Objects that were once securely attached to Earth's surface would continue moving according to their momentum. The longer gravity remained absent, the more unstable the world would become. Cities would cease functioning. Transportation networks would collapse. Power systems would fail. Communication infrastructure would become increasingly unreliable. Civilization as we know it depends on stability. And gravity is one of the primary reasons that stability exists. Now imagine the event lasts not minutes but hours. At that point, humanity would no longer be dealing with a temporary emergency. We would be facing a planetary crisis. The atmosphere would continue expanding. The oceans would continue changing. Agriculture would fail. Water distribution systems would stop working. Every major system that supports modern life would begin breaking down. And if gravity never returned, Earth itself would eventually become a very different world. Not overnight, not even within a year, but over time, the planet would lose many of the characteristics that make it habitable. The atmosphere would gradually escape. The oceans would no longer remain where they are. Life, which evolved under the constant influence of gravity, would face challenges unlike anything in its history. Fortunately, none of that happened. Gravity returned after 5 seconds. The oceans remained. The atmosphere stayed in place. Civilization survived. But the event left humanity with a new perspective. For thousands of years, we have worried about the dangers we can see. The storms, earthquakes, volcanoes, asteroids. Yet one of the most important forces in our lives is completely invisible. We cannot see gravity. We cannot touch it. Most of the time, we barely even think about it. And yet every moment of every day, gravity quietly holds our world together. It keeps the oceans where they belong. It keeps the atmosphere wrapped around Earth. It keeps the moon in orbit. It keeps our cities standing and our feet firmly planted on the ground. It is one of the reasons life is possible at all. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about gravity is not its power. It's its reliability. For billions of years, gravity has done its job without interruption. Silently, consistently, without asking for attention. And maybe that's why we rarely appreciate it. Because the most important things in life are often the things that never seem to change. Until they do. 5 seconds without gravity would not destroy Earth. But it would remind us of something important. Our world is held together by forces we often take for granted. Forces that operate every second of every day. And among them, gravity may be the most important of all. Because the moment it disappears, even briefly, everything else begins to fall apart. As we reach the end of this thought experiment, it's worth remembering one simple fact. Nothing we've discussed today required an asteroid impact. No alien invasion. No supernova. No collision with another planet. All it took was the disappearance of a single force for 5 seconds. Just 5 seconds. A period of time so short that most people would normally ignore it. Yet during those 5 seconds, the world we depend on would begin to unravel. The roads beneath our feet. The air in our lungs. The oceans surrounding our continents. The systems that power modern civilization. All of them rely on gravity. Not occasionally. Not sometimes. Every second of every day. Gravity is one of the few things we assume will always be there. And for good reason. For more than 4 billion years, it has shaped this planet. It helped form Earth from a cloud of dust and rock. It keeps the moon in orbit. It guides the movement of planets around the sun. It helps create stars, galaxies, and some of the largest structures in the universe. And here on Earth, it quietly performs a task so important that we rarely stop to think about it. It keeps our world together. Perhaps that's what makes gravity so fascinating. It's one of the most powerful influences in our lives. Yet it's completely invisible. You can't see it. You can't hear it. You can't hold it in your hand. But its effects are everywhere. In every falling raindrop, in every ocean tide, every mountain, every step you take. Right now, as you watch this video, gravity is doing exactly what it has always done. Holding you firmly on the surface of a planet, moving through space at incredible speed. And chances are you won't think about it again tomorrow, or the day after, because gravity is at its most remarkable when it's unnoticed. When everything works exactly as it should. But if it vanished for just 5 seconds, those 5 seconds would be enough to remind all of humanity how extraordinary it truly is. 5 seconds. That's all it would take. And perhaps the most surprising lesson from this entire scenario is that the universe doesn't always need something huge to change everything. Sometimes the absence of a single invisible force is enough. And until the next time you look up at the stars, remember this: the universe isn't only held together by the things we can see. It's also held together by forces working silently in the background. Forces that have shaped our world since the beginning of time. And among them, gravity may be the most important of all.